Genghis Khan, born as Temujin in 1162 near the Onon River in modern-day Mongolia, remains one of the most consequential figures in world history. He forged a network of alliances, reshaped nomadic politics, and through conquest established the largest contiguous land empire in history. By the time of his death in 1227, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Yellow Sea to the Caspian Sea, and his name had become synonymous with power, ambition, and the transformation of Eurasia. This rise was not sudden, but built upon hardship, betrayal, and an enduring ability to command loyalty. His father, Ögedei, died when Temujin was young, leaving the family vulnerable. Yet from this precarious start, Temujin consolidated tribes, imposed a strict code of law known as the Yasa, and harnessed military innovation to build a dominion that would shape the medieval world. One major confirmed fact is that Genghis Khan unified disparate nomadic tribes into a centralized political system that endured beyond his lifetime. The Mongol Empire, established in 1206 when he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, became a structured system that allocated territories and responsibilities among his descendants. This political model gave rise to a dynasty that claimed legitimacy across Asia for centuries. His direct leadership set precedents for organization, taxation, diplomacy, and military administration that outlasted the empire's fragmentation. A rare but overlooked detail is that Temujin's early alliances were often sealed through marriage politics. One such example is his union with Berta, his first and principal wife, whose support proved crucial in legitimizing his rule. Berta was abducted early in their marriage by the Möngke tribe, and her rescue by Temujin solidified his alliance with allies such as Yuan Khan of the Kharit. This incident not only shaped Temujin's personal life, but also reinforced the cultural significance of kinship and loyalty in the emerging Mongol polity. Berta would go on to bear 4 sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ögedei, and Tolui, each of whom played central roles in the empire's future divisions. A debated point concerns the exact circumstances of Genghis Khan's death in 1227. According to the official secret history of the Mongols, he died during the campaign against the Western Sia, though details are scarce. Some sources suggest he fell from his horse, while others propose he succumbed to illness. Later legends, particularly those recorded in Persian chronicles, speculate more dramatically, including assassination by enemies or hidden wounds from battle. Modern historians generally agree that the official record is intentionally vague, reflecting the Mongols' desire to obscure the vulnerability of their leader at the moment of his passing. What is beyond dispute is that his death marked a transition from unified expansion under a single ruler to a system of succession among his sons and grandsons. The secrecy extended to his burial. It is confirmed that Genghis Khan's tomb has never been located. Traditional accounts state that his body was returned to Mongolia and interred in an unmarked grave, with soldiers allegedly killing anyone who witnessed the procession. While these accounts may be embellished, the fact remains that no archaeological evidence has been definitively tied to his resting place, fueling centuries of speculation. Despite this mystery, the succession of his lineage was clearly defined. Before his death, he designated his 3rd son, Ögedei, as his successor, ensuring continuity while also sowing seeds of rivalry among the brothers. This decision reflected Genghis Khan's vision of empire building not as a single-man endeavor, but as a dynastic project. His sons were entrusted with entire regions, laying the groundwork for the vast imperial divisions that would soon arise. Jochi was allocated lands in the west, Chagatai was entrusted with Central Asia, Ögedei inherited the central authority, and Tolui governed the Mongol homeland. This partitioning provided both stability and potential conflict, ensuring that the descendants of Genghis Khan would shape Eurasia's political map for centuries. The scale of his legacy is further underscored by modern genetic studies. A 2003 study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics revealed that nearly 8% of men across a vast swath of Eurasia carry a Y chromosomal lineage traceable to a single ancestor from the Mongol period. The evidence suggests that Genghis Khan and his immediate male descendants left a genetic footprint still visible across populations today. This remarkable statistic reinforces the reach of his influence, extending from the battlefield into the biological continuity of his line. As the empire transitioned from a personal conquest to a dynastic enterprise, the burden of maintaining cohesion shifted to his heirs. The decisions Temujin made in his final years, the succession of Ögedei, the territorial allocations to his other sons, and the cultural emphasis on loyalty to lineage, set the stage for the turbulent but enduring history of the Genghisid descendants. From this foundation, the narrative moves from the life of the founder into the chronicles of his children, each of whom carried forward both his ambitions and his legacy of conflict. The immediate family of Genghis Khan formed the backbone of the empire he left behind. His union with Berta produced 4 acknowledged sons: Jochi, Chagatai, Ögedei, and Tolui. Each of these figures not only inherited vast territories, but also carried the burden of continuing their father's conquests. Through them, the Mongol Empire became a dynastic system with clearly defined, though often contested, lines of inheritance and governance. While Genghis Khan also fathered daughters who were married into strategic alliances across Eurasia, it was his sons who became central actors in the narrative of succession. A major confirmed fact is that Ögedei, the third son, was chosen as the successor to the title of Great Khan. The decision, announced before Genghis Khan's death in 1227, reflected both practical and political reasoning. Jochi, the eldest, had a strained relationship with his father, largely due to lingering doubts about his legitimacy following Berta's abduction by the Möngke. Chagatai, the second son, was seen as capable but too quarrelsome to unify the empire. Tolui, the youngest, while militarily gifted, was considered too young to assume supreme leadership. Ögedei, by contrast, was seen as even-tempered and conciliatory, making him the most acceptable choice to hold the empire together. In 1229, a Kurultai confirmed his succession, and Ögedei assumed the title of Great Khan, ensuring a continuation of central authority. A rare but overlooked detail is the prominence of Genghis Khan's daughters, who were often married to powerful tribal leaders to secure alliances. Alaka Beki, for instance, was married into the Oirat Confederation, while Alaltun was wed to a leader of the Ongud. These marriages were not merely ceremonial. The daughters often wielded considerable influence in their adopted regions. In several cases, they acted as intermediaries between Mongol rulers and their subject populations, maintaining political cohesion. Yet historical accounts often obscure their roles, focusing instead on the military exploits of their brothers. Modern scholarship has highlighted how these women served as crucial stabilizers in the empire's vast network. A debated point surrounds the actual number of Genghis Khan's children. While Berta's 4 sons are universally acknowledged, multiple sources suggest he fathered many other children with secondary wives and concubines. Persian chroniclers such as Rashid al-Din mention additional sons, though the records are inconsistent. Some accounts suggest that as many as 500 women were connected to Genghis Khan, but this figure may be exaggerated or symbolic of his vast harem. Historians debate the extent to which these claims reflect biological reality or serve as literary devices to emphasize his virility and dominance. While modern genetic evidence points to a widespread paternal lineage originating from his line, direct historical documentation of additional sons beyond Berta's 4 remains uncertain. Among the acknowledged sons, Jochi presents one of the most contentious legacies. Born shortly after Berta's return from her abduction by the Möngke, Jochi's paternity was questioned by many, including Chagatai, who frequently used this as an insult in family disputes. Despite Genghis Khan's insistence that Jochi was his legitimate heir, the suspicion lingered and affected the distribution of power. Jochi was allocated territories in the far west, including the steppes beyond the Ural Mountains, which would later form the basis of the Golden Horde. He died in 1227, shortly before his father, leaving his descendants to establish one of the most enduring Mongol Khanates. Chagatai, meanwhile, inherited the Central Asian heartlands, stretching from the Amu Darya to the Altai Mountains. His strict enforcement of Mongol law, particularly the Yasa, became legendary. Accounts describe him as uncompromising and harsh, which, while ensuring discipline, also created friction with other branches of the family. His lineage would later form the Chagatai Khanate, a key power in Central Asia that lasted in various forms for centuries. Tolui, the youngest, initially acted as regent after his father's death, until Ögedei was formally installed. Renowned for his military prowess, Tolui commanded critical campaigns, including the conquest of the Jin dynasty in northern China. He married Sorghaghtani Beki, a woman whose political acumen ensured the prominence of Tolui's line. Their sons, Möngke, Kublai, Hulagu, and Arik Böke, would each go on to play pivotal roles in shaping Mongol rule across Asia. Sorghaghtani herself is remembered in Persian and Chinese chronicles as a shrewd strategist who influenced imperial politics long after Tolui's death in 1232. Ögedei, as Great Khan, oversaw some of the most significant expansions of the empire, including the invasions of Eastern Europe that reached Hungary and Poland in the 1240s. His reign institutionalized the empire's administration, with the establishment of a permanent capital at Karakorum. Yet Ögedei's leadership also highlighted the challenges of balancing conquest with governance. His death in 1241 created a power vacuum that exposed the fragile unity of the Mongol dynasty. Together, the four sons of Genghis Khan became the architects of the empire's division. Each established a lineage that would produce khanates, dynasties, and ruling families across Eurasia. Their descendants maintained claims to legitimacy for centuries, shaping the political and cultural landscapes of regions stretching from China to Eastern Europe. The foundation laid by this immediate family would both unify and divide the Mongol legacy, as disputes over succession and legitimacy became recurring themes. The transition from the founder's direct rule to his children's domains marked the beginning of an era in which the empire's vastness became both its strength and its vulnerability, setting the stage for the internal rivalries that would soon emerge. When Ögedei was confirmed as Great Khan in 1229, the empire entered a new phase. The inheritance system established by Genghis Khan was now tested, as his sons and grandsons attempted to balance their personal ambitions with the need to maintain unity. Ögedei's tenure as Great Khan was one of both remarkable expansion and growing fault lines that would eventually fracture the empire into distinct khanates. A major confirmed fact is that under Ögedei's leadership, the Mongols completed the conquest of the Jin dynasty in northern China in 1234. This campaign, which had been initiated under Genghis Khan and continued by Tolui, brought vast agricultural and urban resources under Mongol control. It also provided a foothold for further expansion into the Song dynasty to the south. Ögedei's reign institutionalized governance, introducing systems of taxation, census-taking, and postal routes that connected the empire's far-flung territories. The establishment of the capital at Karakorum further symbolized the transition from a mobile steppe power to a settled imperial authority. A rare but overlooked detail is Ögedei's reliance on advisors of diverse backgrounds, including Chinese, Muslim, and Uyghur officials, who played significant roles in administration. Figures like Yelu Chukai, a Khitan Confucian scholar, advised against indiscriminate slaughter in conquered regions and encouraged taxation instead. This policy shift allowed the Mongols to extract sustained revenue rather than rely solely on plunder. Such administrative pragmatism often receives less attention than military campaigns, yet it was crucial in sustaining Mongol dominance. It demonstrated the empire's ability to adapt and absorb expertise from its vast conquests. A debated point centers on the succession after Ögedei's death in 1241. His passing coincided with Mongol forces pushing deep into Europe, reaching as far as Hungary and Poland. The death of the Great Khan required commanders to return to Mongolia for the Kurultai, sparing Western Europe from further invasion. The question of succession became contested. Ögedei's widow, Turgana Khatun, acted as regent, skillfully maneuvering to secure the throne for her son, Guyuk. Some historians view Turgan's regency as an example of female authority within the Mongol political system, while others argue that it exacerbated divisions by prioritizing her own lineage over broader unity. The resulting tension highlighted the fragility of the succession process, as each branch of the family sought to assert its claim. Jochi's descendants, already governing the western steppes, grew increasingly autonomous. Batu Khan, Jochi's son, led the campaign into Eastern Europe, famously defeating Hungarian forces at the Battle of Mohi in 1241. His power base along the Volga River became the nucleus of what historians call the Golden Horde. Batu maintained nominal allegiance to the Great Khan, but in practice, his authority was independent. This westward expansion brought the Mongols into direct contact with European kingdoms, creating both fear and opportunities for diplomacy. Chagatai's line, ruling Central Asia, enforced Mongol law with strict discipline. The Chagatai Khanate served as a vital link along the Silk Road, but its rulers often clashed with both the Golden Horde and the central authority in Mongolia. Their enforcement of the Yasa contrasted with the more flexible policies of Ögedei's administration, underscoring divisions in governance styles that foreshadowed further fragmentation. Tolui's descendants also played increasingly prominent roles. Möngke, Kublai, Hulegu, and Arik Börke emerged as significant figures in the mid-13th century. Sorgagtani Beki's political acumen ensured her sons were well-positioned. Möngke would eventually become Great Khan. Kublai would establish the Yuan dynasty in China. Hulegu would found the Ilkhanate in Persia, and Arik Börke would lead rival claims within Mongolia itself. The prominence of Tolui's line reshaped succession politics, often at the expense of Ögedei's descendants. The divisions became formalized in the mid-13th century as the empire effectively split into four major khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai Khan. While all continued to claim descent from Genghis Khan, their policies, cultures, and interests diverged. Trade and diplomacy connected them, but internal rivalries often prevented unified action. The dream of a single Mongol empire gave way to a network of related but independent states. Yet, the prestige of descent from Genghis Khan remained central to legitimacy. Across each khanate, rulers invoked their ancestry to assert authority. This dynastic principle meant that even as the empire fractured, the name of Genghis Khan continued to carry unparalleled weight. It was both a unifying symbol and a source of conflict, as rival branches debated whose claim was truest. This era of division illustrates both the strength and weakness of Genghis Khan's legacy. His system of allocating territories to his sons allowed for expansion, but also guaranteed rivalry. The empire once unified under his leadership, became a constellation of successor states, each powerful in its own right, but often at odds with the others. From this fragmentation, the stories of the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, the Ilkhanate, and the Yuan dynasty would unfold, shaping Eurasia for centuries and extending the influence of Genghis Khan's descendants far beyond the steppes. The western and central domains of Genghis Khan's descendants became two of the most influential legacies of his dynasty. The Golden Horde, founded by Batu Khan, son of Jochi, dominated the steppes and Russian principalities, while the Chagatai Khanate, ruled by the descendants of Chagatai, shaped Central Asia for centuries. Together, these lines extended Mongol authority into regions where their impact would remain visible long after the empire's unity dissolved. A major confirmed fact is that Batu Khan established the Golden Horde around 1242, following his return from campaigns in Eastern Europe. Centered, first, along the lower Volga, and later at Sarai, the Khanate controlled vast territories stretching from the Black Sea to Siberia. Russian principalities, including Kiev, Vladimir, and later Moscow, were forced to pay tribute. This system of subordination, often called the Mongol yoke, lasted for over 2 centuries, profoundly shaping Russian political and economic development. The Golden Horde's power lay not only in military dominance, but also in its ability to integrate into the region's political fabric, extracting tribute while allowing local rulers to retain internal autonomy. A rare but overlooked detail about the Golden Horde is its role as a conduit of commerce. The Volga River became a major artery of trade, linking the steppe to the Caspian and beyond. Italian merchants from Genoa and Venice established colonies in Black Sea ports such as Kaffa, conducting business with the Horde. The Khanate issued its own coinage, including silver dirhams, which circulated widely across Eurasia. These coins bore inscriptions in Arabic, reflecting the Islamic influence that grew within the Horde over time. By the late 13th century, rulers such as Berke Khan had converted to Islam, making the Golden Horde the first Mongol Khanate to adopt the religion officially. This conversion had lasting consequences, as it aligned the Horde with Islamic states while setting it apart from other Mongol branches. A debated point concerns the extent of Jochi's legitimacy in shaping the Horde's identity. Some chroniclers, particularly Chagatai supporters, questioned whether Jochi had been Genghis Khan's true son, due to Berta's abduction before his birth. Although Genghis Khan publicly recognized Jochi, the shadow of doubt lingered. This dispute influenced later rivalries, with Chagatai's descendants often clashing with Jochid lines over succession and territory. Historians remain divided on how deeply these doubts affected the cohesion of the Mongol elite, though the political independence of Batu's descendants suggests they operated with considerable autonomy, regardless of legitimacy debates. Meanwhile, the Chagatai Khanate governed the Central Asian heartlands. Chagatai, known for his stern adherence to the Yasa, established a dynasty that would oversee crucial segments of the Silk Road. This region encompassed cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Kashgar, making it strategically vital for trade between East and West. Under Chagatai's descendants, the Khanate became a hub of cultural exchange, blending Mongol traditions with Persian, Turkic, and Islamic influences. Yet its rulers struggled with internal divisions, as local emirs and tribal leaders often wielded more practical power than the Khans themselves. One overlooked dimension of the Chagatai Khanate is its role in preserving Mongol identity through language. The Chagatai literary language, a Turkic dialect heavily influenced by Persian and Arabic, eventually emerged as a major cultural medium across Central Asia. By the 15th century, it had become the language of poets, such as Ali Shir Nava'i. Although this development occurred long after Chagatai himself, the lineage's name became synonymous with a cultural tradition that outlasted their political authority. The Chagatai Khanate thus contributed not only to governance, but also to the shaping of Central Asian literary heritage. A further debate among historians centers on the degree to which the Golden Horde and the Chagatai Khanate remained loyal to the Great Khan in Karakoram, or later in Kublai's Yuan dynasty. Officially, they acknowledged the supremacy of the Great Khan, but in practice, they acted independently. The Golden Horde's rulers conducted their own diplomacy, engaging directly with European powers, while the Chagatai Khans often resisted UN influence. Some scholars argue that this autonomy reflected the natural evolution of empire into regional powers, while others see it as evidence of the Mongols' inability to sustain centralized rule across vast distances. The descendants of Batu and Chagatai often clashed along their borders, reflecting the competitive nature of Mongol politics. Yet both lines managed to entrench themselves in their respective regions. The Golden Horde influenced the trajectory of Russian statehood, indirectly contributing to the rise of Moscow as a dominant power by the 15th century. The Chagatai lineage, though eventually weakened, maintained its role as a custodian of steppe traditions and Islamic governance, bridging the Mongol past with emerging Turkic identities. By the late 14th century, both the Golden Horde and the Chagatai Khanate faced challenges from new powers. In Central Asia, Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, rose to prominence, often invoking his marriage alliance with the Chagatai line to legitimize his authority. In Russia, the gradual assertion of independence by Moscow eroded the Golden Horde's dominance. These shifts marked the beginning of the end for the direct political control of Genghis Khan's descendants in these regions, even as their legacy persisted in culture, law, and lineage claims. As the western and central branches of Genghis Khan's descendants consolidated power, other lineages carried the Mongol legacy into Persia, China, and South Asia. The Toluid line in particular reshaped much of Eurasia through its most famous representatives, Möngke, Kublai, Hulagu, and their successors. Their rule marked both the height of Mongol influence and the diversification of Genghisid dynasties into distinct regional empires. A major confirmed fact is that Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis through Tolui, established the Ilkhanate in Persia in 1256. His campaigns included the capture of Baghdad in 1258, which ended the Abbasid Caliphate. This act reverberated across the Islamic world, symbolizing both Mongol power and devastation. The Ilkhanate extended across Iran, Iraq, parts of Anatolia, and the Caucasus, creating a dynasty that ruled until the mid-14th century. Hulagu's descendants integrated into Persian society, adopting Islam by the reign of Genghis Khan in 1295. Their governance blended Mongol military traditions with Persian administrative systems, leaving a lasting imprint on the region's political and cultural landscape. A rare but overlooked detail about the Ilkhanate is its role in early scientific patronage. Hulagu sponsored the construction of the Maragay Observatory in modern-day Iran, led by the astronomer Nasir al-Din al-Tusi. Completed in 1259, the observatory became a center for astronomical study, producing star charts and advancing mathematical models that influenced both Islamic and European science. This scientific endeavor, emerging from a Mongol dynasty, illustrates how the descendants of Genghis Khan were not solely warriors, but also patrons of knowledge. A debated point concerns the religious orientation of the Ilkhanate before Ghazan's conversion. While Hulagu himself was Buddhist, many of his Mongol followers adhered to shamanic practices, while the conquered populations were predominantly Muslim. This created tensions, particularly after the sack of Baghdad. Historians debate whether the Mongol rulers intentionally resisted Islam to assert dominance, or whether the diversity of faiths among them simply reflected the transitional nature of Mongol identity in the Middle East. Ghazan's conversion and his subsequent enforcement of Islam as the state religion marked a decisive shift, but the contested nature of religion in the Ilkhanat's early decades highlights the complexity of Mongol rule. In China, Kublai Khan, another grandson of Genghis, established the Yuan dynasty in 1271 after defeating the Song dynasty. His rule marked the first time that the entirety of China was governed by a non-Han dynasty. Kublai relocated the capital to present-day Beijing, initiating policies that sought to integrate Mongol and Chinese institutions. The Yuan dynasty lasted until 1368, when it was overthrown by the Ming, yet its legacy included administrative reforms, infrastructure development, and the promotion of trade along the Silk Road. The Yuan court also became famous in the West through the travels of Marco Polo, who described Kublai's empire in glowing terms, furthering the mystique of Mongol power in European imagination. One overlooked detail of Kublai's reign is the introduction of paper currency as the primary medium of exchange across his empire. While earlier dynasties had experimented with it, Kublai institutionalized paper money on an unprecedented scale, backed by silver reserves. This system facilitated trade across the vast Yuan domains, though inflation and counterfeiting later undermined its stability. Nevertheless, the policy demonstrates how Mongol rulers embraced innovation in governance as well as conquest. A debated point concerns the extent to which Kublai maintained Mongol identity. Some scholars argue that his embrace of Chinese culture, adopting Chinese court rituals, Confucian advisors, and administrative systems, marked a departure from traditional Mongol steppe values. Others contend that he preserved core aspects of his heritage, including military organization and the emphasis on dynastic legitimacy through Genghis Khan. This duality reflects the adaptability of Genghis Khan's descendants, who could integrate into diverse civilizations while maintaining claims to their ancestral legacy. In South Asia, another branch of Genghisid lineage emerged through Babur, a descendant of both Timur, Tamerlane, and Genghis Khan, via his Chagatai ancestry. In 1526, Babur founded the Mughal Empire in India after his victory at the Battle of Panipat. The Mughal dynasty endured until the mid-19th century, producing some of the most iconic rulers in South Asian history, including Akbar, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. The Mughals left behind monumental architecture such as the Taj Mahal, as well as a legacy of cultural synthesis blending Persian, Indian, and Central Asian traditions. An often overlooked detail about Babur is his own memoirs, the Baburnama, one of the earliest known autobiographies in Islamic literature. Written in Chagatai Turkish, it offers detailed accounts of his conquests, personal reflections, and observations of the lands he encountered. This text preserves not only the story of a Mongol Timurid conqueror, but also insights into the landscapes and societies of Central and South Asia during the early 16th century. A debated point surrounding the Mughals concerns the extent of their identification with Mongol heritage. While Babur emphasized his Chagatai descent, later emperors increasingly defined themselves through Persianate and Islamic traditions, downplaying direct references to Genghis Khan. Some historians argue this was a strategic shift to align more closely with their subjects, while others suggest it reflect the natural evolution of identity over centuries. Regardless, the Mongol ancestry of the Mughals remained part of their dynastic narrative, linking their empire to the legacy of the steppe. By the late medieval and early modern periods, Genghis Khan's descendants had founded or influenced multiple major dynasties: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Yuan dynasty in China, and the Mughal Empire in India. Each adapted Mongol traditions to local contexts, leaving imprints that lasted long after their political dominance ended. Their stories illustrate the extraordinary geographical reach of Genghis Khan's lineage, stretching from the Russian steppes to the Indian subcontinent, binding together the history of Eurasia through bloodlines, politics, and culture. The legacy of Genghis Khan's descendants extends beyond medieval dynasties, reaching into modern debates about genealogy, identity, and science. While the political power of Genghisid lines diminished over time, the prestige associated with his ancestry persisted across regions, shaping both noble families and cultural memory. Today, the question of who can truly claim descent from Genghis Khan remains both a historical and scientific puzzle. A major confirmed fact is the endurance of Genghisid titles well into the modern era. In Central Asia and Russia, noble families trace their legitimacy to Jochi's line, calling themselves Genghisids or Chinggisids. In the Chagatai Khanate, founded in the 15th century, rulers had to demonstrate direct descent from Genghis Khan through Jochi to be considered legitimate. This requirement endured into the 19th century under the Russian Empire, where members of the Kazakh aristocracy, known as the Tura, continued to claim privileges based on their lineage. Similarly, in the Crimean Khanate, established in the 15th century, rulers from the Ögedei dynasty claimed descent from Genghis Khan through Jochi. This connection gave them not only local legitimacy, but also international recognition when negotiating with the Ottoman Empire and European states. A rare but overlooked detail is the persistence of Genghisid lines in smaller khanates across Central Asia. The Khans of Astrakhan, Kazan, and Sibir all claim descent from Jochi, embedding the Genghisid name into regional politics well after the Golden Horde had fragmented. In fact, Ivan III of Russia, known as Ivan the Terrible, married Maria Temrykovna, a Circassian princess connected to these Genghisid families, illustrating how dynastic links extended into Muscovite politics. These intermarriages reveal how the prestige of Genghis Khan's name reached even into the emerging Russian state, long after the Mongol yoke had ended. A debated point concerns the actual continuity of these genealogical claims. While many noble families in Central Asia, Crimea, and the Caucasus maintained written genealogies tracing themselves back to Genghis Khan, historians disagree on their accuracy. Some argue that genealogies were manipulated for political advantage, with rulers fabricating or exaggerating connections to secure legitimacy. Others contend that oral traditions, coupled with written records, such as the secret history of the Mongols and Persian chronicles, provide credible evidence of descent. This tension between political narrative and historical accuracy remains a central challenge in assessing Genghisid legacies. In modern times, scientific research has added new dimensions to the story. A landmark 2003 genetic study led by researchers at the University of Leicester identified a Y chromosomal lineage present in approximately 8% of men across a vast region from Central Asia to northeast China. This lineage, known as the star cluster, is believed to originate from a single common ancestor who lived around the time of Genghis Khan. The study proposed that this genetic footprint could be traced back to Genghis himself or one of his immediate male relatives. Subsequent studies have refined these findings, but the core conclusion that Genghis Khan's lineage left a measurable mark on global genetics remains widely cited. A debated issue within this field is whether the star cluster can be definitively attributed to Genghis Khan himself. Critics argue that while the genetic distribution aligns with Mongol expansion, it could also represent the legacy of another prolific male lineage from the same era. Supporters of the Genghis attribution point to historical records of his vast number of wives and concubines, combined with the political dominance of his descendants, as evidence supporting the genetic connection. The debate underscores the difficulty of linking genetic evidence directly to a single historical figure, even one as prominent as Genghis Khan. In Mongolia today, Genghis Khan remains a national symbol, his image appearing on currency, monuments, and state institutions. The Chinggisid name continues to carry immense cultural prestige. Families claiming descent from him in modern Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and Central Asia often do so through oral tradition rather than verifiable documentation. For many, the symbolic connection to Genghis Khan matters more than genealogical certainty, representing a link to a shared cultural heritage that transcends political boundaries. The descendants of Genghis Khan thus straddle two worlds: the historical record of dynasties that ruled Eurasia for centuries, and the modern identity rooted in pride, myth, and genetic research. From the Yuan emperors of China to the Mughal emperors of India, from the Khans of Crimea to the nobles of Kazakhstan, the bloodline of Genghis Khan became a central thread in Eurasian history. Even as their political power faded, the prestige of descent remained a force that shaped dynasties, diplomacy, and national identity. Today, the legacy of Genghis Khan's descendants is measured not only in dynasties and monuments, but also in the genes of millions. The scientific and historical record may never provide absolute certainty about every branch of his lineage, but the scale of his impact, political, cultural, and biological, remains beyond doubt. His descendants forged empires, adapted to diverse societies, and left behind traditions that continue to resonate. The story of Genghis Khan's family is not one of disappearance, but of transformation, from conquerors of the medieval steppe to enduring figures in the shared heritage of nations across Eurasia. The story of Genghis Khan's descendants spans 8 centuries, from the windswept steppes of Mongolia to the courts of China, Persia, Russia, and India. His sons divided an empire that became too vast to remain united. Yet, through their rivalries and alliances, they reshaped the history of half the world. The Golden Horde imposed tribute on the Russian principalities. The Chagatai Khanate dominated Central Asia. The Ilkhanate integrated Mongols into Persian culture. And the Yuan dynasty transformed China's political landscape. Later, the Mughal emperors of India carried the Genghisid legacy into the early modern period, leaving behind some of the most enduring cultural monuments in history. Beyond these dynasties, the name of Genghis Khan remained a touchstone for legitimacy. In the Kazakh steppe, in the Crimean Khanate, and even within Russian politics, descent from Genghis Khan conferred authority. Whether in documented genealogies or oral traditions, the claim of Chinggisid blood remained powerful long after Mongol armies ceased to dominate. The endurance of this claim underscores how lineage could transcend the fall of empires, shaping identity across centuries. In the modern world, science has added new layers to this story. The discovery of a genetic lineage shared by millions of men across Eurasia suggests a biological echo of Genghis Khan's reproductive and political power. While debates continue about whether this lineage can be definitively tied to him, the finding highlights the scale of his family's impact. Combined with national pride in Mongolia and cultural memory across Central Asia, it demonstrates that Genghis Khan's legacy is not confined to history books, but lives on in identity, culture, and even the human genome. The descendants of Genghis Khan never vanished. Instead, they adapted, merged with other dynasties, and transformed into new cultural identities. Their empires rose and fell, but their influence endured. From medieval Khans to modern genetics, their story is one of continuity through change. A reminder that the legacy of one man can shape nations, cultures, and even populations across the span of centuries.